The room was already glowing with power. Gold chandeliers, crystal glasses, the kind of people who smiled with their teeth but judged with their eyes. Everyone was dressed like their bank accounts were on display, and they were. This was the Mercer Foundation Gala, the biggest night of the year. The kind of night Daniel Mercer always attended alone. But tonight something changed. The doors opened slowly, and the moment she stepped in, the entire room stopped breathing. Aaliyah Mercer, the wife nobody in this room had ever seen. The wife Daniel never brought. The wife people whispered did fit the image. She walked in wearing a deep olive dress that hugged her confidence, not her body. Her hair was natural, shaped like a crown she didn't need permission to wear. Her eyes were steady, steady like a woman who'd been ignored too long and finally decided to stop asking for space. Cameras didn't flash, but whispers did. Is that her? He never brings her. Why would she show up tonight? She heard every word. She let every word fall behind her like dust she refused to carry anymore. Then her eyes found him. Daniel, standing beside three investors, laughing at a joke he didn't care about. The second he saw her, the laugh died. His chest froze. His face softened, then tightened, then fell apart entirely. It looked like guilt. It looked like fear. But underneath all of that, it looked like he'd been hit by a truth he couldn't run from anymore. Aaliyah didn't look away. Neither did he. For the first time in their marriage, the distance between them wasn't physical. It was the truth he'd buried. She took another step inside, and every pair of eyes followed her like she was walking into forbidden territory. Nobody in this room knew why she came. Nobody knew what Daniel had been hiding. Nobody knew the storm that was finally breaking open. But what they didn't know would change everything. Aaliyah Mercer wasn't born into rooms like the one she walked into tonight. She grew up in a neighborhood where people shared what little they had, where women braided hair on porches, where laughter carried even on hard days. She learned early how to be gentle and strong at the same time, a balance the world rarely offered her back. She became an art therapist for children, helping kids paint the feelings they didn't know how to speak. Every day she watched kids find freedom in color, and every evening she came home covered in little fingerprints of blue and yellow. She loved her work. She loved her world. But she also loved Daniel, a man from a life completely different from hers. Daniel Mercer grew up in a white, upper-class family that believed reputation was a religion. People cared more about who you were seen with than who you truly were. His parents held dinners where only certain kinds of people were welcome, and Daniel learned young how to keep his shoulders straight, his voice steady, his image perfect. Then he met Aaliyah. She wasn't impressed by status, titles, or the way he walked into a room like everything belonged to him. She challenged him. She laughed with him, not at what he bought, but at who he became when he wasn't pretending. He fell in love with how she saw the world, not as something to conquer, but something to heal. They married quietly, joyfully. But the problems began quietly, too. At first, Daniel said he wanted to settle into married life before bringing her to corporate events. Then he said he was too busy. Then he said certain dinners were work only. The excuses came smooth and gentle, like he was trying to cushion a blow he didn't want to admit was coming. Aaliyah asked him once softly, while folding laundry, "Do you want to be seen with me?" He kissed her forehead and told her she was overthinking, but she was. She felt the truth tightening around her like a thread slowly being pulled. There were worse moments, too. A charity dinner where she wasn't invited, but photos later showed him sitting beside a woman his board adored. A holiday gala he said was too chaotic. Then she saw him tagged in a group picture, smiling like the world belonged to him. She didn't doubt his love. She doubted his courage. Aaliyah didn't need a man who showed her off like a trophy. She needed a man who didn't hide her like a mistake. Daniel's fear wasn't rooted in hate, but in history, a lifetime of being taught that appearances mattered more than truth. A lifetime surrounded by people who saw women like Aaliyah as unpolished, unfitting, difficult to explain. People who wouldn't say anything cruel out loud, but would say everything with a raised eyebrow and a tight smile. Whenever Daniel entered those rooms, he shrank. He let their expectations shape him. He let their standards silence him. And he let his silence hurt her. Aaliyah tried to ignore the pain, but every unshared dinner, every missing invitation, every photo shoot where he looked single, added weight to her heart. One evening, after he left for yet another event without her, she sat alone at their dining table, a warm plate of food cooling in front of her. She looked at the empty chair beside her and whispered to herself, "If love has to hide, is it love at all?" But she stayed patient. She told herself he needed time. She told herself his career was complicated, that his world was different, that maybe one day he would be ready. Then came the Mercer Foundation Gala, Daniel's biggest night of the year. The night people said would determine his future on the board. His chance to secure a partnership, a public spotlight, a step into the highest tier of his career. He never mentioned bringing her. He never even asked if she wanted to go. And something inside her finally broke. Not in anger, in resolve. She stood in front of her mirror that evening, wearing a dress she had bought months ago, for an event she hoped he would invite her to. She looked at herself, at her shoulders, at the strength in her eyes. She realized she didn't need permission to exist in her own marriage. She didn't need to be chosen. She needed to choose herself. She silently picked up her keys, walked out the door, and drove to the gala on her own. Not to embarrass him, not to provoke a fight, but because she was tired of living halfway in someone else's world. She arrived. She stepped inside. She watched the whole room turn toward her. And when Daniel's eyes found hers, full of shock, guilt, and something deeper, she understood one thing clearly. He wasn't ashamed of her. He was afraid of how much power she held to expose every lie he told to keep his world intact. Tonight wasn't just about showing up. Tonight was about reclaiming every moment she'd been erased. And the story that began the second she entered would force Daniel to face the truth he'd avoided for years. Not about her. About himself. Aaliyah had barely taken 10 steps into the ballroom when the temperature in the room shifted. It wasn't physical. It was social. A cold awareness spread through the air like an invisible ripple. People stood straighter. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Smiles tightened into thin lines. This was a world built on invisible rules, rules everyone followed without speaking. And Aaliyah, simply by existing here, had broken the biggest one. She didn't belong. At least that's what they believed. But she didn't flinch. Her chin stayed lifted. Her breath stayed steady. Her eyes never wavered from Daniel. He was still across the room, surrounded by wealthy investors and board executives, all dressed in the kind of black and silver fashion that screamed asterisk exclusivity asterisk. They were laughing, relaxed, confident, until he saw her. The moment his eyes met hers, everything inside him collapsed. Daniel's shoulders dropped, his smile cracked, his grip on the glass in his hand loosened. He wasn't expecting her. He wasn't ready. And he definitely wasn't prepared to face the truth standing in front of him, a truth wearing an olive dress and years of unspoken pain. Aaliyah walked further in. A woman with a diamond necklace stepped into her path, blocking her with the coldest polite smile Aaliyah had ever seen. "Service entrance is around the back," the woman said. Aaliyah blinked slowly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't show a flicker of offense. "I'm not staff," she replied softly. The woman's eyebrows twitched upward. She didn't apologize. She didn't even step aside on her own. She simply stood frozen until Aaliyah moved around her, elegant, controlled above it. The whispers grew louder. "Oh my goodness, he's married. To her. He's never brought her before. She doesn't look like him at all. Why tonight?" Aaliyah kept walking. She wasn't here to fight. She wasn't here to prove anything. She was here for answers, and she was ready to hear them even if they broke her. Finally, Daniel excused himself from his group. His voice cracked on the words. He pushed through the crowd, one careful step after another, like he was walking toward something he feared would explode. When he reached her, he didn't smile. He didn't speak right away. He just breathed her name. "Aaliyah." She looked him directly in the eyes, not as a wife seeking comfort, but as a woman demanding truth. "Hi, Daniel." His throat tightened. What are you doing here?" He tried to make it sound gentle, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. She tilted her head just a little. Shouldn't the real question be, why was I invited? Daniel swallowed hard. He glanced over his shoulder, then back at her as if worried someone might be watching. But everyone was watching. The entire room was watching, and that made his panic worse. Let's talk somewhere private, he murmured, reaching for her elbow. Aaliyah stepped back, keeping distance between them. No, we can talk here. Her voice was soft, steady, devastating. Daniel inhaled sharply. He knew she was hurt. He just didn't know how deep it went. Aaliyah, please, he whispered. This isn't the right place. Her eyes glimmered with something heavy, something tired, something honest. Where is the right place then, Daniel? She paused. Because for 2 years, it's never been anywhere near your world. His face paled. He couldn't escape that truth. He had nothing to defend himself with, only excuses he was tired of giving and she was tired of hearing. Behind him, 2 board members stared with narrowed eyes, exchanging silent disapproval. Their posture made the message clear. Handle this, fix this, don't let her be here. Aaliyah noticed. Of course she noticed. She had spent a long time learning how to read the room, a necessary skill for a black woman navigating spaces not made for her. She scanned the room slowly. The discomfort, the surprise, the judgment, the silent calculations written on people's brows. For years, she wondered why Daniel didn't bring her. Tonight, she saw the answer clearly. It wasn't about her. It was about them, and about the part of Daniel still tied to their approval. Daniel leaned closer, lowering his voice, trying to shield her from shame he caused. I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable, he whispered. She didn't blink. Then why did you marry me? The question hit him like a physical blow. His chest rose sharply as if he'd been punched. His breath stuttered. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I love you, he said, but the words came out too quickly, too defensively. Then show it, she replied. Silence stretched between them. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't angry. She was simply done shrinking. A group of investors walked by slowly, pretending not to stare. Their glances weren't hateful. They were curious, confused, assessing her like a puzzle piece that didn't fit the picture. Daniel saw those stares and visibly shrank. Aaliyah saw him shrink, and that was the moment her heart cracked. Because she realized something painful. He loved her in private, but he feared loving her in public. And that fear wasn't hers to carry. Then the moment that would change everything happened. One of the biggest investors, a tall man with an expensive suit and a voice full of performative politeness, approached Daniel with a practiced smile. Daniel, you didn't tell us you were married. He held out a stiff hand to Aaliyah. You must be quite the surprise. Aaliyah shook his hand. Her grip was firm, her expression unreadable. The investor continued, his tone flavored with patronizing curiosity. You seem very different from Daniel's usual crowd. Daniel tensed immediately. Aaliyah felt a sting, not because of what the man said, but because Daniel didn't correct him. Not with words, not with body language, not with anything. He simply stood there, waiting for the moment to pass. But Aaliyah didn't let it pass. She looked the investor directly in the eyes and answered. Different isn't always a weakness. Sometimes it's the only truth in the room. The investor blinked, not expecting that level of grace. Daniel's eyes widened. He had never seen her like this, calm, confident, unbending. And for a moment a flicker of pride crossed his face, but pride wasn't enough anymore. Aaliyah stepped back. Her voice lowered to something soft and final. I think I'll go. Daniel panicked instantly. He reached out, grabbing her wrist gently. Aaliyah, wait, please don't leave. I need you here. That sentence, those 4 words, made the entire room tilt. Guests looked up. Bodies stilled. The tension shifted again, but this time toward them. Daniel needing her was the first truth he'd spoken out loud in this room. And now everyone was listening. The moment Daniel said, I need you here, *, a wave of confusion rippled through the room. People who once pretended not to stare now openly watched. Investors paused their conversations mid-sentence. The board members who had been monitoring from across the room exchanged anxious glances. Daniel Mercer, the polished, composed, socially bred golden boy, had never shown vulnerability in public. And here he was, holding his wife's wrist like she was the only solid thing in a room built on fragile egos. Aaliyah felt the desperation in his grip. But she also felt something else. Fear. Not fear of losing her, fear of how the room saw him with her. She gently freed her wrist. Not harshly, not with anger, just enough to reclaim her space. "Why do you need me here, Daniel?" Her voice was soft, but every syllable cut cleanly. Daniel opened his mouth, but his answer tangled in his throat. He glanced around again, at the board, at the donors, at the social elites who silently questioned if she belonged. Aaliyah followed his gaze. And that was all the answer she needed. She stepped back. Her posture didn't weaken, it sharpened. "Tell me," she whispered, "is it me you want beside you, or is it the image you're trying to protect?" Daniel's face flushed, not in anger but in shame. Before he could respond, a woman from the board, elegant and icy, approached with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Daniel, we need you for a moment." Her gaze flicked over Aaliyah quickly, like assessing a misplaced item. Daniel froze. His polite instincts kicked in, the instincts trained by a lifetime of appeasing people like her. But Aaliyah watched him closely. She saw the moment clearly. He was about to let go of her to satisfy them. And that realization bruised her more than any whisper in the room. She spoke before he could move. "Go ahead," she said quietly. "I know how this works." Her words made Daniel's stomach drop. They landed like a truth he'd been running from since the day he said "I do." But still he hesitated. The board member frowned, impatient. "Daniel," she repeated, "it's important." This time, Aaliyah didn't wait for him to choose. She turned away first. She didn't storm out. She didn't break down. She walked slowly, with posture, with dignity, toward the nearest corner of the room. And that hurt Daniel more than anything, because Aaliyah had never walked away from him before. Not in anger, not in hurt, not in disappointment. He felt the distance growing with every step she took. The moral weight of it pressed on his chest like gravity. For the first time, Daniel wasn't afraid of the board. He was afraid of losing her. But fear didn't give him words. It scattered them. The board member practically dragged him away. From across the room, Aaliyah stood alone near a display of silent auction items. Paintings, sculptures, photographs representing the wealth of people who would never live the stories depicted in them. She stared at a painting of a stormy ocean, dark waves crashing against a jagged cliff. And suddenly, she understood why she had come tonight. She was tired of being the calm. She was ready to be the wave. A couple approached her, their smiles tight, their voices sweet in a way that dripped with underlying question. "So," the woman said, "how long have you and Daniel known each other?" "5 years," Aaliyah answered. "Oh," the man said, mildly surprised. "And he's never brought you?" Aaliyah held his gaze. "No, he hasn't." They shifted awkwardly, not expecting such direct honesty. "Well, you look lovely tonight," the woman said, voice lifting like a bandage over a wound she didn't want to see. Aaliyah thanked her politely. But inside, her heart twisted. Not because of their questions. Because of Daniel's silence. He wasn't across the room defending her. He wasn't speaking proudly of her. He wasn't choosing her, not yet. Meanwhile, the board had taken Daniel into a nearby alcove, private, but not private enough that Aaliyah couldn't see the edges of his panic. The board chair, an older man with a voice heavy from years of entitlement, spoke first. "Daniel, we cannot afford surprises tonight. This event reflects the company's image." Daniel clenched his jaw. "She's my wife." The chair nodded slowly. "Yes, of course, but you must understand how donors react to unexpected elements." Daniel's chest tightened sharply. "Her existence isn't an element," he forced out. But the board wasn't listening. They were calculating, assessing risk, reputation, optics. In their world, inclusion was a slogan, not a practice. Diversity was a brochure image, not a lived reality. And Daniel was finally seeing the ugliness he had tried to ignore. We just need to ensure, the chair continued, that tonight's focus stays on the company's future, not distractions. Distractions? That word echoed in Daniel's head like a slap. He looked toward Aaliyah, standing alone, still dignified. The woman he vowed to protect. The woman he asked to build a life with him. The woman he allowed others to treat like she was optional. Suddenly, the truth twisted through him like fire. He had been part of their world for so long, he didn't realize he had become them. Aaliyah wasn't a distraction. She was the only thing that made his life real. In that realization, something inside him cracked open. The board was still speaking, lecturing him about votes, donors, impressions, but Daniel walked away mid-sentence. They called after him, startled. He didn't stop. He moved through the ballroom, weaving between guests who pretended not to stare. His eyes searched for Aaliyah, heart pounding against his ribs. He found her by the painting again, the stormy ocean. She didn't look at him right away. She didn't move. She simply stayed still, steady, and heartbreakingly quiet. Daniel approached slowly, feeling the weight of everything he'd ever failed to say. "Aaliyah," he whispered. She finally turned. Her eyes weren't angry. They were tired. Tired in a way that scared him. "That's what I am to them, isn't it?" she said. "A distraction." "No," Daniel breathed, "you're not. They're wrong." "Are they?" Her voice trembled, not with weakness, but with truth. "Or have you been telling me the same thing without using the word?" Daniel felt his defenses crumble. He couldn't lie anymore. Not to her. Not to himself. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Aaliyah stepped back. Not because she was leaving, not yet, but because she needed air to speak her truth. "Then show me," she said. "Show me I matter to you in the rooms where I've been erased." Those words didn't just spark the conflict. They ignited the story. Because from this moment on, Daniel's world would no longer be separated into two lives. And the people who thought her presence was a problem were about to learn just how wrong they were. Aaliyah didn't sleep that night. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, the shadows slicing across the room every time a car passed outside. Daniel slept beside her, or at least pretended to. His breaths were too controlled, too careful, like he was afraid the truth might escape with the air. She could still hear the gala whispers echoing in her head. Every stare, every smirk, every surprised gasp when she walked in like she didn't know the rules she was supposed to follow. Rules Daniel never admitted existed. By sunrise, she already knew what she needed, the one thing she'd avoided for years. Answers. Real ones. Not excuses wrapped in business language, not half-truths coated in "I'm protecting you." Actual truth. When Daniel finally turned toward her, his eyes already apologizing, she sat up. "We need to talk," she said quietly. He nodded, "I know." But the conversation didn't happen. Because right then his phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again, non-stop, back-to-back messages popping up like a storm breaking. He looked at the screen, and all the color drained from his face. Aaliyah watched him. And for the first time, she wasn't scared of the truth. She was scared of his reaction. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't answer. He just slid out of bed, grabbed his suit jacket, and said, "I have to go now." "Daniel." She stood, "What's happening?" He hesitated, his hand frozen on the doorknob. Then the simplest, most painful sentence. "It's about last night." And he left. The Foundation boardroom was already full when Daniel arrived. Every seat taken, every face sharpened with judgment. The same people who had smiled at him all night now watched him like he had personally burned the building down. The chairman, Mr. Crawford, old money, old power, old prejudices, cleared his throat. "Daniel," he began, "we need to address the disruption." Daniel swallowed. "If this is about Aaliyah." "It is," Crawford cut in, "your wife." The way he said wife felt like he meant something else. "A problem. A scandal. An inconvenience." Daniel's jaw tightened. She didn't do anything wrong. Crawford sighed. She didn't have to. Optics matter. You know that better than anyone. Someone slid a printed photo across the table. Aliyah walking into the gala. Cameras turning. Heads swiveling. Then another photo. Aliyah standing alone, surrounded by whispers. Then another, Daniel staring at her with fear in his eyes. 3 sponsors called this morning, Crawford said flatly. 2 threatened to pull their funding. 1 already did. Daniel clenched his fists. Why? Because my wife exists. Silence. A silence full of an answer nobody wanted to say out loud. Finally, Crawford leaned forward, fingers steepled, voice low. Daniel, we warned you years ago. Certain rooms have unspoken expectations. Your marriage is complicated. Daniel felt heat rising in his chest. Complicated for whom? For people who don't want to explain things to shareholders, Crawford replied. For donors who prefer. Prefer, Daniel snapped. Prefer what? A specific kind of woman standing next to me. Nobody answered. And that silence became the loudest confession in the room. Crawford leaned back. Look, son, you've built an impeccable image. No scandals, no noise, no surprises. But last night. Last night, Daniel interrupted, my wife showed up to support me at my asterisk event. And that's a problem for you. A few board members exchanged glances, uncomfortable but not enough to speak. The chairman's tone hardened. You know what this job demands. Appearances matter. Associations matter, your wife. Her name, Daniel said sharply, is Aliyah. And she cannot simply walk into events she wasn't approved for, Crawford replied. You must manage expectations. Daniel stared at him. So you want me to hide her? Crawford didn't flinch. We want you to maintain stability. Donors don't like surprises, they like familiarity. Familiarity? Meaning women who looked like asterisk them. Daniel's voice went cold. We're done here. He walked out. Not one person stopped him. Meanwhile, Aliyah stood in front of the living room window, phone in hand, watching the city morning unfold in front of her. People hurrying to jobs, kids in uniforms rushing to school, taxi horns, normal life. Hers didn't feel normal anymore. She opened social media. The first post had her picture. Then another. And another. Who is she? This is Daniel's wife. She didn't belong there. She overstepped. Why would he marry someone like her? Each comment sliced deeper. But the one that hit hardest wasn't an insult. It was a question. If he's proud of her, why is this the first time we've seen her? She sat down slowly, the screen glowing painfully in her hand. She didn't cry. She'd cried before, years ago when the first excuses started, when Daniel skipped introducing her because it's just business, when he said, next time, and next time never came. She thought she had moved past old hurts. Clearly she hadn't. Just then she heard keys at the door. Daniel walked in, but he didn't look like the powerful, confident man she saw at the gala. He looked small, lost, like the world he built was starting to collapse from the inside. We need to talk, he repeated. Aliyah stood, then talk. He opened his mouth and closed it again. His hands trembled slightly. I should have brought you years ago, he said. I should have never let them. Them, she asked sharply. Daniel, what exactly did you let them do? His throat tightened. He looked at the floor, ashamed. They didn't want. He exhaled shakily. They didn't want me to bring you. Aliyah froze. Not because she didn't expect the truth, but because hearing it out loud felt like the air had been punched out of her chest. They, she repeated, your company, your board, your donors. He nodded. And you agreed with them? No, Daniel said immediately. No, I didn't agree, I just... You went along with it, she finished for him. Soft, quiet, deadly accurate. He didn't deny it. Because he couldn't. She stepped back a little, not dramatically, but enough that Daniel felt the space widen like a canyon. I spent years thinking you didn't bring me because maybe I didn't fit in, she whispered. But the truth is, you let them convince you that I didn't. Daniel swallowed hard. Aaliyah, I was trying to protect you. By hiding me, she asked. By erasing me. He had no answer. She nodded slowly, a long, aching acceptance settling in. Last night wasn't the first time you were ashamed of me, she said quietly. It was just the first time I saw it. Daniel stepped forward. Aaliyah, please. Don't. Her hand lifted gently, stopping him without touching him. Tell me the rest, tell me everything. His voice cracked. They threatened my position. She exhaled, not surprised, just disappointed. And you chose them, she said. No, he whispered, I chose fear. Aaliyah's eyes softened, but not enough to erase the hurt. Fear of losing your job, she said. And fear of being seen with your own wife. He closed his eyes. And finally, the truth he had buried for years rose to the surface. I was afraid they would look at me differently, he whispered. Judge me, cut me out, treat me like I didn't belong anymore. Aaliyah inhaled deeply. And instead of fighting them, you let them treat me like I didn't belong. Silence. A silence so heavy it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. That's when Aaliyah knew. The real battle had only just begun. And nothing about their lives would ever be the same again. Daniel sat down on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, palms pressed against his face like he was holding his whole world together. Aaliyah didn't sit. She stood in front of him, not towering, not intimidating, just steady. The way a person looks when they've run out of space to shrink themselves. Daniel, she said quietly, tell me why you listened to them. He dragged his hands down his face, exhaling. The truth came slow, like it was resisting the light. Because I thought, if I didn't play their game, I'd lose everything. You wouldn't, she replied. He shook his head. Aaliyah, you don't know how they operate. You were never in those rooms. Because you never let me in, she said. That one sentence cracked something in him. His shoulders fell as if he finally felt the weight of the years between them. Aaliyah crossed her arms, not defensive, just bracing herself. So, she continued, tell me what they said, word for word. Daniel hesitated, not because he didn't remember, but because he remembered too clearly. They told me, he said slowly, that bringing my wife would complicate things with investors. Aaliyah's jaw tightened, but she didn't interrupt. They told me, he continued, that I had a clean image and I should keep it consistent. Her eyes narrowed. Clean, she repeated, as opposed to what? Daniel closed his eyes. He didn't want to say it. She didn't want to hear it. But both of them knew the meaning hidden inside those words. Then he whispered the truth. They meant you wouldn't fit what they expect from someone at my level. Aaliyah felt the words like a slap. Not because she was surprised, but because they confirmed everything she already suspected. She nodded slowly, and you agreed. I didn't agree, Daniel said quickly. I didn't fight back, that's not the same. It is, she said flatly. You don't have to swing the knife to be part of the cut. That sentence hit him harder than any anger could. He opened his mouth to explain, but Aaliyah raised her hand slightly, not to silence him, but because she wasn't done. How long did you let them talk about me like that? Daniel swallowed. Aaliyah. How long? She repeated, her tone firmer. He stared at the floor. Years, he whispered. Aaliyah let out a breath that trembled just slightly. She steadied herself with her hand on the arm of the couch. Years. She had suspected it. She had felt it in the excuses, in the delays, in the canceled events, in the way he always softened the truth. But hearing it aloud made everything real. She stepped back from him, only one step, but it felt like a mile. You let them shrink me, she said quietly, and you never even warned me. Daniel stood suddenly. Aaliyah, I was trying to protect us both. She shook her head. You were trying to protect your reputation, not me. He flinched. For the first time since the gala, Daniel truly saw the cost of his silence, not just on their marriage, but on her spirit. He reached for her hand instinctively, but she stepped back again. Don't, she said softly. It wasn't anger, it wasn't coldness. It was restraint, the kind that forms when a person realizes their hurt runs deeper than they thought. Daniel let his hand fall. Aaliyah, please, tell me what you're thinking. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she said the words he feared most. I don't know who I am to you anymore. The rest of the day passed in slow, heavy silence. Daniel stayed home from work, making calls, sending emails, trying to hold onto meetings and contracts that were slipping through his fingers. But he kept glancing at Aaliyah sitting by the window, curled on the sofa with her notebook, trying to write but unable to focus. Every time he tried to talk, she told him she wasn't ready. Not yet. He gave her space. He owed her that much. But by evening, things changed. A knock came at the door. Not a soft knock. A firm, deliberate knock that carried the weight of purpose. Daniel opened it and froze. Standing there was Mr. Crawford, the man who practically raised Daniel's career from the ground up. The man who once called him son. The man who now looked at him like a liability. Daniel, Crawford said coolly, we need to talk. Daniel stepped aside reluctantly. Crawford walked in without acknowledging Aaliyah, which only proved how deeply the board underestimated her. She stood, lifting her chin slightly, watching him with quiet, unshaken dignity. Crawford glanced at her just long enough to make his disapproval obvious. Then he turned to Daniel. We're in trouble, he said. 2 more sponsors have withdrawn. The PR team is panicking. They're calling this the Mercer image crisis. Daniel stiffened. Because my wife attended a public event, do you hear how absurd that sounds? Crawford ignored that. The board believes the situation can still be controlled if you issue a statement. Aaliyah's eyes narrowed. What kind of statement? Crawford barely spared her a glance. Something simple, something clarifying. Daniel's stomach sank. What are you suggesting? Say she wasn't supposed to attend, Crawford replied. Say it was a misunderstanding, miscommunication, that she didn't know the event was private. Aaliyah inhaled sharply. Crawford continued, oblivious. And after that, take a little space. Decline the next few appearances. Go alone, rebuild confidence. Aaliyah stepped forward. So your solution is to throw me under the bus. Crawford turned to her, finally giving her direct eye contact, the cold, evaluating kind. My solution, he said slowly, is to restore stability. You have to understand, Mrs. Mercer. My name is Aaliyah, she cut in. Crawford blinked, surprised that she interrupted. Very well, he said stiffly. Aaliyah, you must realize that certain rooms require certain optics. Investors want predictability. Aaliyah held his gaze. Predictable means what? Someone who looks like them. Crawford didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence was the answer. Daniel's fists curled. I'm not doing it. Crawford turned sharply. Daniel, think carefully. I have, Daniel said. I'm not blaming my wife, and I'm not pretending she wasn't welcome. She wasn't, Crawford snapped. You know the rules. Then the rules are rotten, Daniel shot back. Aaliyah didn't speak, but she felt something shift in the room. For the first time, Daniel wasn't just reacting, he was pushing back. Crawford exhaled. If you refuse, the board will have to take action. Daniel's jaw tightened. Meaning what? Crawford hesitated. Then said it. You may lose your position. Daniel looked at Aaliyah, not for approval, not for permission, but because she was the only truth in the room. And Aaliyah looked back, steady, calm, still hurt but not silent. She didn't give him an answer. She didn't nod or shake her head. But in that moment, he realized something. The job he was trying to protect was already costing him more than it was worth. Daniel turned back to Crawford. Then I guess the board will do what it needs to, he said. Crawford stared at him, shocked, furious, and for the first time, powerless. This is a mistake, he said sharply, stepping toward the door. Daniel held the door open. Maybe, but it's mine to make. Crawford walked out without another word. Daniel closed the door slowly. The house fell quiet. Aaliyah watched him, not relieved, not triumphant. Just thoughtful. Daniel, she said softly, that was a big decision. He nodded, it was the right one. She didn't answer. Because decisions have consequences, and not all consequences are immediate. And the fallout was only beginning. The fallout began faster than Daniel expected. The morning after Crawford's visit, headlines appeared everywhere. Corporate rising star challenges board decision. Daniel Mercer refuses to issue statement on gala incident. Internal tensions shake Mercer Foundation. Articles didn't mention Aaliyah by name, but the undertone was clear. She felt the tension before she even opened her eyes. Daniel barely slept. He sat on the edge of their bed, head lowered, suit half on, phone buzzing non-stop with calls from executives demanding he clarify his stance before things went too far. But something inside him had shifted. The fear that once controlled him now looked small compared to the woman sitting quietly across the room, tying her hair, pretending not to hear the storm building behind him. "Aaliyah," he said softly, "I have a board meeting today. Mandatory, they want a final answer." She didn't turn. "Do you know what you're going to say?" Daniel let out a slow breath. "I'm going to tell the truth." Aaliyah finally faced him. Her eyes weren't angry, they were searching. "Which truth?" she asked. "The one you've been telling them, or the one you've been hiding from yourself?" He swallowed. "I guess I'll find out." He said goodbye, but she didn't move toward him. She didn't kiss his cheek. She didn't promise it would be okay. She simply whispered, "Be honest, with them and with yourself." Daniel left with his heart heavier than any briefcase he'd ever carried. The Mercer Foundation headquarters was a fortress of glass, clean, tall, perfect. Everything Daniel had been trained to be. As he stepped inside, every greeting felt colder. No one met his eyes, some whispered, others pretended not to notice him. By the time Daniel reached the top-floor conference room, he knew what awaited him. The board, Crawford, the silent judgment that had ruled his life since he was young. The room was long and polished, lined with people whose faces barely moved when he entered. Crawford sat at the center like a king, waiting for the servant who disappointed him. "Daniel," he said, voice smooth but cutting, "we're beginning." Daniel took a seat. No one spoke for a moment. Not because they respected him, but because they were giving him the chance to undo everything. Crawford folded his hands. "We'll make this simple. The board needs assurance that your situation will not continue affecting our image." Daniel looked him dead in the eye. "My wife isn't a situation." Several board members exchanged glances, the kind of glances that said he was already losing. Crawford leaned back. "Daniel, if you won't issue the statement, then answer this. Why did you allow her to attend an event she knew nothing about? Why did she walk in without clearance? You realize how inappropriate that was." Daniel's jaw tightened. "She didn't walk in without clearance. I just never gave her any, because I was too afraid of how people in this room would react." Crawford stiffened. "Are you accusing this board of discrimination?" "I'm stating a fact," Daniel said. A sharp breath passed through the room. Crawford's voice dropped. "Watch your words." "I've been watching them my whole life," Daniel replied. "And they're the reason I married the woman I love but shielded her like she was something I had to apologize for." He paused, and for the first time in years, he didn't hide. "I'm done doing that." A woman on the left cleared her throat. "Daniel, you're stepping into very dangerous territory." "No," he said. "This board already pushed me there and expected me to stay quiet." He stood. "I'm done being quiet." Crawford's eyes narrowed. "If you walk out of this room." Daniel cut him off. "I'm not walking out, I'm finishing." He faced the entire board. "You want a statement? Fine, here it is." He took a slow breath, letting the truth finally surface. "I let you make me believe my wife wasn't good enough. I let you treat her like a liability. And I let myself become a man who was ashamed to fight for what was right because I wanted your approval more than I wanted integrity." Silence. No one dared move. "I won't do it anymore." Crawford spoke carefully. "So what do you want, Daniel?" Daniel didn't blink. "I want you to understand that the reason you fear losing investors is because you built a culture that rewards silence and punishes truth. And if my marriage is the price you're willing to gamble with just to maintain your image, then I don't want any part of this." Crawford stared. "You're resigning." Daniel didn't look at him. "I'm reclaiming myself." He picked up his folder, closed it, and placed it gently on the table. I hope the next man you choose values his job more than his soul. Then he walked out, past the board, past Crawford, past the whispering hallways and polished floors. He left behind the life he had spent years climbing toward, a life built on the condition that he conform, comply, and stay silent. But outside, as he stepped into the sunlight, for the first time he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Back home, Aaliyah spent the morning pacing. Her stomach twisted with every hour that passed. Her hurt was real, but so was her fear that Daniel might fold under pressure, fear that he might choose the comfort of his world over the discomfort of truth. She was packing away some art supplies when the front door opened. Daniel entered quietly, not triumphant, not defeated. Just real. He placed his blazer over a chair and looked at her. "It's done," he said. She searched his expression, meaning. "I told them everything," he said, "and I walked away." Aaliyah froze. The silence stretched, long enough for Daniel to imagine every worst outcome. Finally, she spoke. "You walked away from all of it, your position, your future." "Yes," he said, "because I'm not losing myself to keep a seat at a table that was never built for people like us." Her breath hitched. "Daniel." He shook his head. "I should have defended you years ago. I should have stopped hiding. I should have stopped pretending their comfort mattered more than your dignity." His voice cracked. "And I'm sorry." Aaliyah didn't speak. Her heart wasn't ready to forgive, but it was ready to understand. She stepped closer, not to comfort him, not to resolve everything, but to see him clearly. For the first time, he was the man shaped by that world. He was the man willing to break it. "So what now?" she whispered. Daniel exhaled. "Now we rebuild, not for them, not for image, for us." Aaliyah studied him. Her pain didn't vanish. Her wounds didn't disappear. But something shifted. For the first time in years, she saw a version of Daniel untouched by fear or expectation, the man she fell in love with before the world claimed him. She nodded slowly. "Then we start there." Daniel closed his eyes briefly, relief washing through him. But when he opened them, she wasn't done. "Daniel," she said softly, "this doesn't erase the hurt. You can't fix everything with one moment of courage." "I know," he said. "This is just the beginning." "I know," he repeated. "And I need time." He nodded. "Take all you need." She let out a breath she had been holding for months, maybe years. Then, for the first time since the gala, Aaliyah sat beside him. Not close, not distant, just beside him. Two people facing the wreckage of silence. Two people deciding whether to rebuild from it. And somewhere inside the quiet between them, the foundation of change finally formed. The old Daniel, the one who hid her, shrank her, apologized for her, died in that boardroom. And the man who walked out was someone who could finally stand beside her without trembling. The week after Daniel left, the foundation felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful quiet, not tense quiet, just unfamiliar. Aaliyah moved carefully around the house, carrying the weight of everything that had happened. Daniel respected every inch of space she needed. He didn't over-explain, he didn't justify, he didn't try to earn praise. He simply showed up, fully present for the first time in years. Every morning he woke before sunrise and sat at the dining table with a notebook. Not for the board, not for strategy, for himself. Pages filled with questions he'd never forced himself to confront. What do I value? What do I fear? Who am I when no one is watching? Aaliyah saw the change, but she didn't rush toward it. She had spent years being patient for the wrong reasons. This time she was patient for herself. On the third evening, while she cleaned up after dinner, Daniel approached her carefully. "Can we talk?" he asked. She nodded, placing a dish towel on the counter and turning toward him. He didn't speak immediately. He seemed to be choosing words that weren't excuses or apologies, words that held weight. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said, "about why I hid you, why I hid us." He exhaled, and I realized something painful. Aaliyah folded her hands. "Go on." Daniel looked down for a moment, then back at her. I spent my whole life trying to be the person they admired, their perfect son, their golden employee, their success story. His voice deepened. I let that version of me become so big it swallowed everything else. Aaliyah listened quietly. I wasn't just hiding you, Aaliyah, he continued. I was hiding the parts of myself that didn't fit their world, and that included loving someone who didn't meet their expectations of acceptable. He shook his head slowly. But you aren't the one who didn't fit. I'm the one who broke myself trying to fit. Aaliyah's expression softened, not with forgiveness but with understanding. She spoke gently. You can't heal what you never name, so thank you for naming it. He nodded, absorbing her words. But Daniel, she added, you need to know something too. She stepped a little closer, not to comfort him, but to make sure he heard her clearly. I wasn't hurt because you listened to them. I was hurt because you stopped listening to yourself. She held his gaze. The man I married was brave, honest, unafraid of truth. Somewhere along the way you stopped being him. Daniel swallowed. And now, he asked quietly. Now, Aaliyah said, considering him. Now you're trying to find your way back, and I see that, but this process, it's not instant, and it's not just about you proving you've changed. She took a breath. It's about me learning whether I can feel safe beside you again. Daniel lowered his head, but not in defeat, in acceptance. I understand, he said, and I'm here however long it takes. Days turned into a rhythm neither of them expected. Daniel began volunteering at the youth arts program where Aaliyah worked, not to impress her, but because he wanted to understand the world she lived in, the one he'd kept separate from his own. He watched her with the children, gentle, patient, unafraid to lift others even when she carried her own pain. The kids loved her instantly. Daniel understood why. She gave people the kind of love that demanded nothing in return. For the first time, he saw her not as someone he was supposed to protect from judgment, but someone he was supposed to walk beside. At home, he cooked more, he cleaned, he asked questions he never asked before. How did you feel that night? What did my silence cost you? What do you need from me now? Sometimes Aaliyah answered, sometimes she didn't. Healing has its own timing, and he respected hers. But slowly, something shifted. One afternoon, as they were sorting through boxes in the attic, Aaliyah came across an old envelope labeled, "For when you don't believe in yourself." She frowned, "What's this?" Daniel blinked, "I forgot about that." She opened it. Inside were letters Daniel had written to himself years ago, reminders of the man he wanted to be. Choose courage. Choose truth. Choose love over approval. Choose the life you build, not the life you perform. Aaliyah read quietly. When she reached the last line, her breath caught. Never let the world dim the woman who walks beside you. She closed the letter, looking at him with a mixture of surprise and ache. You wrote this before we even got married. He nodded, before the world taught me to forget. She held the papers to her chest for a moment, not as forgiveness, but as a reminder that the man she had loved once existed long before the board got to him. And that maybe he could exist again. One evening at dinner, Aaliyah spoke first. Daniel, she said slowly, I've been thinking about us, about everything. He set down his fork. She continued, I don't want to live in the past. I don't want to stay trapped in old wounds. But I need to see that we're building something different this time. Not a marriage that looks good from the outside, but one that feels honest on the inside. He nodded, listening. So, she said, I want us to try, really try, not reset, not erase, just rebuild. Daniel let out a breath he had been holding for months. Aaliyah, thank you, he whispered. She shook her head gently. This isn't a reward, it's a choice, and choices come with work. I'm ready, he said. She studied him for a moment, the new steadiness in his voice, the quiet conviction in his eyes. Then she said something she hadn't said in a long time. Then let's take this one day at a time. The next day they made a small promise. Not to fix everything overnight. Not to pretend nothing happened. Not to chase some perfect version of their life. But to do one thing each day that built trust instead of breaking it. A shared morning walk. A conversation without defensiveness. A moment of honesty even when it stung. A gesture that said, I see you. Brick by brick, they rebuilt the foundation that had crumbled. And one quiet evening, as Aaliyah closed her journal and placed it beside her on the couch, she looked at Daniel, really looked, and saw the man standing in front of her wasn't the polished version the board crafted, but the imperfect, evolving, honest man she chose years ago. The one who finally chose himself and her over everything else. For the first time since the gala, she felt something she thought she'd lost. Hope. Not naive hope. Not blind hope. But the kind that grows in the rubble when two people decide truth matters more than image, and love matters more than reputation. The kind of hope born from change, not promises. The kind strong enough to rebuild what silence almost destroyed. Some truths are hard to face. Some decisions carry weight heavier than years of silence. Daniel Mercer's journey wasn't about leaving a job or defying a board. It was about choosing dignity over fear, integrity over image, and love over approval. Aaliyah's strength wasn't in forgiveness alone. It was in her courage to demand honesty, her patience to let change happen slowly, and her refusal to shrink herself to make someone else comfortable. In a world that often tries to erase what doesn't fit its expectations, their story reminds us that power isn't measured by titles, wealth, or influence. True power lies in facing injustice, speaking truth, and standing beside the people we care about, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's uncomfortable, and even when the world tells us not to. We live in spaces that often reward conformity and silence. But real courage is making the choice to stand tall, even if the room shakes around you. It's reclaiming the parts of yourself that were hidden, suppressed, or undervalued. And it's honoring those you love by refusing to let society's narrow definitions dictate their worth. No one can choose your integrity for you. No one can fight your battles for you. And no one can decide the value of your presence except you. Aaliyah and Daniel's story is a reminder that healing is not instant. And redemption is not about erasing the past. It's about acknowledging it, learning from it, and building something stronger in its place. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear that courage, love, and truth are stronger than fear and expectation. And remember, the world may try to silence what matters, but your voice, your choices, can rewrite the story. Because in the end, the measure of a life isn't the power we hold over others, but the integrity we hold within ourselves, and the love we refuse to compromise, no matter the cost.